paleontology bingo is finally back, and so let's just go along with it.
When we think of dangerous dinosaur weapons, our minds jump to giant jaws and flesh-tearing claws.
We can circle the text blasting from video tile, as well as that a lot of people seem to forget about ceratopsian horns and Cyclops tails.
In the prehistoric arms race, let's be honest, the meat-eaters usually get all the attention.
You know, ripping a Triceratops head off is definitely a cool thing coming from a T-Rex, as you can see here, because, well, the T-Rex had to decapitate the Triceratops before the Triceratops can just gore. I'll still circle the A segment contains T-Rex tile,
Which makes it all the more remarkable that one of the most effective weapons in dinosaur history didn't belong to a carnivore at all.
Herbivores and carnivores have their own fair share of weapons, and so, like, can you really compare them?
It actually belonged to a plant eater, a medium-sized, slow-moving herbivore with a tail that could turn a predator's worst day into their last.
This title is called The Only Tale Where Evolution Went Off Script, and Stegosaur tales, they didn't go off script when it comes to evolution. We're going to safely circle the talks about facts not relevant to the title tile.
This is the Stegosaur, a set of 4 vicious spikes at the end of a dinosaur's tail.
Okay, this one I have absolutely no problem with. So, this is off to really a bad start so far. Hopefully it can redeem itself.
One of the few prehistoric weapons that belonged to a herbivore that we know for a fact was used to kill.
In fact, they were used as a weapon, correct. They were also likely used for display.
A group of herbivores evolved not just to warn off predators, but to impale them.
The Stegosaurs warn predators. However, if they are careless, those predators could get impaled. So, there's that for you.
And the most famous of them all, the one that turned this tail into an icon, the Stegosaurus.
I'm guessing this guy said that because the Stegosaurus is the most famous and well-known stegosaur. That's to be expected.
Stegosaurus is one of the most iconic dinosaurs in history, instantly recognizable by the double row of towering plates along its back, and a head that looks comically undersized for its massive body.
Okay, so far it's a bunch of facts that provide little value. Hopefully this can have a bunch more, like, other facts that actually provide a little bit of value, especially for me and my viewers.
But beneath that prehistoric armor was something far more dangerous than it looked. This wasn't a sleek, speedy predator.
You serious?
Who would even think that the Stegosaurus was a predator? Man, this is just absolutely no value.
It was a lumbering, slow-moving herbivore, and the company it kept? Allosaurus.
There's also the Torvosaurus, and also now called Allosaurus annex, by the way, not Saurophaconax anymore.
Torvosaurus. Ceratosaurus.
Not like the Ceratosaurus hunted the Stegosaurus when that niche was already occupied by the Allosaurus and Torvosaurus.
3 of the most dangerous carnivores of the Jurassic. They weren't the only dinos around, but if you were a Stegosaurus, those were the names that kept you up at night.
Please. Well, Stegosaurs, they do need to sleep, of course, and Stegosaurs, they just stick together, basically.
Stegosaurus had no sharp teeth, no speed.
We can now circle the makes a ridiculous statement tile because it's quite an exaggeration.
And a brain barely larger than a walnut. Outrunning or outsmarting its enemies was not an option.
Well, it's going to have to rely on its Stegosaur anyway. And even then, something like Allosaurus/Torvosaurus would probably resort to ambush tactics.
At over 9 meters long,
Larger Stegosaurs probably reached that length. Not gonna lie, I'll let that thing off the hook.
about the size of a bus, and tipping the scales at around 5 metric tons, Stegosaurus was no small fry. But it wasn't exactly built for speed.
Well, not like it has to, unlike hadrosaurs, who have no immediate weapons, physical weapons to speak of. They just use their entire body, really.
And let's be honest, it wasn't built for brains either. Its brain was tiny, like really tiny.
Man, you gotta stop making fun of Stegosaur's intelligence and instead make fun of sauropod's intelligence.
So much so that it was often labelled, maybe unfairly, as the dumbest dinosaur of all time.
I believe that is an outdated statement, and it probably should belong to sauropods. By the way, I asked Microsoft AI Copilot, and it said that sauropods and stegosaurs, even though they are not very smart, they are smart enough to occupy their environment and exist for a long time. There is a reason why. They are considered dumb, even amongst dinosaurs. However, they are actually smart enough to just adapt to their environment. If they are super dumb, way too dumb to adapt to their environment, then they wouldn't exist in the first place. Now, if you want to point out creatures that are especially dumb and are not really built for intelligence, you can look at the ankylosaurs, because, well, they don't really need to be smart. They just need to have a lot of armor. They already have a lot of armor, so they don't really need to be smart in order to defend against predators.
And with that lack of brain power, probably came poor eyesight as well.
Makes sense, since, well, their occipital lobes are part of their brain.
So no, it wasn't going to outrun a predator, and it definitely wasn't going to outthink one.
I asked Copilot once again with lion and zebra intelligence, and they both showed intelligence in different areas to do different things, really. Basically just serving different niches when it comes to their intelligence. So allosaurs and stegosaurs, they probably were similar in this regard. Now, when it comes to the grand scheme of things, allosaurs and stegosaurs, I mean, allosaurs had to chomp on stegosaur's head because, you know, it's the stegosaur's weakness. It's its head. It's going to have to get crushed. There's a few exceptions to rule, like T-Rex and Ankylosaurus. And, like, Ankylosaurus doesn't really need to be smart. It already has a whole lot of armor to defend itself against the T-Rex. I imagine the Allosaurs and Stegosaurs would work slightly different from Ankylosaurs and T-Rex, but you get the idea, right? The Stegosaurs are not the dumbest. Meanwhile, Allosaurs, they're not the smartest. But, of course, they are, well, they had to adapt to each other, and they had to, you know, combat each other from time to time again. Man, paleontology gets way more complicated than a simple matter of who would win in a fight. Paleontology is just... Man, I really need to study paleontology more. I'm not a paleontologist, I'm not an expert.
So it needed something else. Something physical, something unmistakable. Something that made even the boldest carnivore stop and think twice.
Predators need to think twice before attacking an herbivore anyway. Because, you know, they have to think about the herbivore's weak spots. They have to organize a strategy in order to take down an herbivore like a Stegosaurus, when it comes to an Allosaurus.
It had something else. A weapon. So strange and specialized that it stands out even in the age of dinosaurs. The term Thagomizer started as a joke in a Gary Larson Far Side cartoon.
Which is correct. And, well, it's quite a funny story, but the Thagomizer eventually became an actual name, an actual thing. Informal, by the way.
But scientists quickly adopted it to describe the Stegosaurus's tail spikes. Typically consisting of 4 long spikes, each one able to reach over 3 feet in length.
Of course, there has to be some length in order to puncture an Allosaurus skull or something.
That's 1 meter. CT scans and analysis of Stegosaurus tail vertebra reveal something surprising. The base of the tail was built for flexibility and power. It had strong muscle attachments and enhanced mobility, allowing it to swing with speed, control, and deadly precision.
Okay, these are, well, fair enough. There's really no point in contesting these facts. So, yeah. That's pretty much all there is to say about this. Not ending the video, by the way. It's not even close to over.
This wasn't some slow, clumsy swipe. It was a calculated strike.
Well, if it's calculated, and Stegosaurs are probably going to have to be smart enough to actually swing their tails like this. They probably weren't intelligent enough to understand the lethality of their weapon.
Engineered by evolution. And this isn't just theoretical. A fossil of an Allosaurus, a top predator of the time, was found with a puncture wound in its pelvis.
When it comes to stuff like this, Ankylosaurs and Stegosaurs, they don't really need to kill their opponent. They just need to disable them, and then to prevent them from, like, hunting further, and they'll just die slow and painful deaths or something.
The wound was perfectly round, the size and shape matching a Stegosaurus tail spike. The impact was so violent, it likely crippled the Allosaurus.
Which makes complete sense. I also like those plates having different colors, blood vessels and all that. Those vibrant colors, variation and all that. It's a cool detail in this art.
The fossil shows signs of large abscesses and infection around the wound, suggesting it lived long enough to suffer, but not long enough to heal.
Makes sense because there's absolutely no medicine back then.
Death would have been slow and painful. And here's the wildest part. This makes the Stegosaurus the only dinosaur we have direct fossil evidence that actually killed a fully grown Allosaurus.
Okay, I searched the T-Rex versus Triceratops matchup, and there's not much evidence of actually killing, so I guess, fair enough, you win.
Not bad for a dinosaur with the brain smaller than a hot dog. Paleontologist Ken Carpenter reconstructed the mechanics of Stegosaurus's tail.
You're not really showing a Stegosaur right now, but okay, fine. This is just okay.
And found it could likely swing in an arc of nearly 180 degrees. That meant that it could defend both sides of its body and land a strike to the ribs, legs, or even the face of any predator that got too close.
That's if the predator is stupid enough in the first place, in which I don't think predators are stupid enough to just go into Stegosaurus agonizer, but okay.
Unlike the blunt force tail clubs of Ankylosaurus,
It's pronounced Ankylosaurus or Ankylosaurus, not Ankylosaurus. You know what? We're going to be circling the pronounces a creature wrong tile.
Stegosaurus's tail remained flexible, lacking stiffening structures. This wasn't about smashing, it was about stabbing with precision. So why evolve such a specialized weapon?
Display and defensive purposes against Allosaurus.
It was because the Stegosaurus lived in a dangerous neighborhood, the Morrison Formation.
Now, when it comes to the Morrison Formation, there is a smaller stegosaur called the Hesperosaurus, in which the Allosaurus probably hunted a bit more than the Allosaurus hunting Stegosaurus. The Allosaurus probably hunted the Hesperosaurus more frequently because it's a safer target overall. It's a smaller target, and Torvosaurus likely hunted the Stegosaurus more frequently because Stegosaurus is larger, and Allosaurus and Torvosaurus, they don't want to compete with each other. Though in all seriousness, both the Allosaurus and Torvosaurus hunted both the Stegosaurus and the Hesperosaurus.
Where most Stegosaurus fossils are found, was home to some of the deadliest predators of the Jurassic. Ceratosaurus with its blade-like teeth.
Not like the Ceratosaurus hunted Stegosaurus, but okay.
Torvosaurus, one of the largest carnivores of its time, and Allosaurus, a relentless hunter built for tackling big prey. In a world like that, thick skin wasn't enough.
Thick skin wasn't enough, as if thick skin is just enough for every prey to just escape from their predators.
Stegosaurus needed a weapon, and the Stegomizer was just that. A final warning and a fight-ending blow.
I'm kind of believing that this video is just Stegosaurus Glee Fest, but then again, herbivores like Stegosaurus, they don't get as much attention as other herbivores like Triceratops or Montosaurus and Ankylosaurus and whatnot.
It wasn't just for scaring predators off, it could end the confrontation with one well-placed strike.
Once again, fair enough. Nothing much to say here.
So it's clear the Stegosaurus had some serious firepower.
What you're showing right now is not a Stegosaurus. What you're showing right now is a Warhosaurus, which is closely related to the Stegosaurus. However, it's still different. It's the Warhosaurus, not the Stegosaurus.
but it wasn't the only member of the Stegosauridae family to wield the deadly tail.
There's a whole lot of stegosaurs, as you can see here, each also with a tail, like the Stegosaurus. So,
in fact, some of his relatives
calling Stegosaurus, he is kind of weird, don't you think? I'm not trying to be homophobic or transphobic or anything like despise pronouns in general. In fact, I do like neo-pronouns. However, this is kind of weird, don't you think?
Evolved even weirder and potentially deadlier versions. One standout is Kentrosaurus.
Now, one problem I have with the statement is that the Kentrosaurus lived 152 million years ago, around the same period as the Stegosaurs, even though they didn't coexist with each other. They still lived in the same time period, and so Stegosaurus did not evolve into Kentrosaurus. That statement is completely ridiculous.
Who took things to the next level and developed one of the fastest, most lethal tail swings in dinosaur history. It may have been smaller than the famous Stegosaurus, but its tail was anything but less effective.
Implying that the Kentrosaurus is better than the Stegosaurus. What sort of metric are you using?
Where Stegosaurus relied on heavy, powerful swings with its broad thagomizer, Kentrosaurus evolved a faster, more agile weapon. Its tail spikes were longer, thinner, and sharper.
The difference between the dynamic between Allosaurus and Stegosaurus, as well as Veteropristiosaurus and Kentrosaurus, is that Allosaurus and Stegosaurus is larger. But when it comes to Veteropristiosaurus and Kentrosaurus, they're both more or less similar, leaning more towards Veteropristiosaurus.
Relative to its body size, almost like a natural set of spears. Biomechanical studies estimate that Kentrosaurus could swing its tail at speeds ranging from 18 miles per hour to possibly over 40 miles per hour.
40 miles per hour is a bit of a stretch. At most, more close to around 31 miles per hour.
Depending on factors like muscle power, tail flexibility, and body mass. Some of the more sensational claims have suggested speeds as high as 90 miles an hour.
Man. Absolutely outlandish claims once again. This is just...
I have no words. Nothing.
But those figures aren't strongly supported by scientific evidence. Whatever the exact number is, scientists and paleontologists agree on one thing. Kentrosaurus had a tail swing that was notably faster than Stegosaurus.
So I asked Copilot about it, and I have a feeling that it's a bit dodgy over here, but I guess this is okay. It's not really great. It's kind of dodgy, especially when it comes to the Stegosaurus.
Its smaller, lighter build and longer, thinner spikes made its tail a quicker, more agile weapon, capable of rapid, precise strikes that complement its nimble frame perfectly.
More so used to handicap rather than actually kill because, well, Veteropristiosaurus and Kentrosaurus height difference.
Think less sledgehammer and more whip crack.
Whip crack? It's kind of an exaggeration, don't you think? If it's more of a whip crack, then it's going to be more of a Diplodocus, and Diplodocus is going to break its own tail.
This difference in tail function likely reflects their size and lifestyle. Stegosaurus, much larger in weight, used its tail power to fend off massive predators. Kentrosaurus, about half the length and less bulky, needed a weapon that matched its more nimble frame.
Of course, the larger an animal is, generally the slower the animal is. So it really isn't that surprising when you think about it a bit harder.
Its tail spikes, long and sharp, probably aimed at vulnerable areas like the legs or abdomen of the attackers.
Fair play, it's going to have to incapacitate its predators to just prevent them from attacking this thing. It's not so killing, it's more incapacitating, since the difference in height between the Kentrosaurus and Veteropristiosaurus is definitely much more noticeable when it comes to the grand scheme of things.
And most likely use their tails for aggression much more often than Stegosaurus. Fossil evidence even backs this up. Many Kentrosaurus tail spikes show clear signs of wear.
Okay, so instead of showing show, the text showed so. Man, that's a cool tongue twister. But it's clear that this video uses automatic subtitles.
And even healed fractures, proof that they weren't just for show. They weren't decorative spikes, they were getting used, something we don't see as clearly in Stegosaurus specimens.
Oh yeah? Then explain this!
These injuries tell us that Kentrosaurus wasn't just waving its tail around as a display, it was genuinely a dangerous weapon in real fights.
We're derailing a bit here, but sometimes AI isn't even accurate, as you can see. Just because AI references a game with accurate models doesn't mean that it's accurate information, or at least reliable information.
Along with its threatening tail, Kentrosaurus was covered in smaller spikes and plates along its back and hips, adding extra protection.
Okay, cool, there's no contesting that. Fair enough.
But it was that flexible whip-like Thagomizer that made it a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, I don't know if calling it a whip is a great idea, especially when it comes to Diplodocus and all that. Actually, it kind of is, given that the iguana also whips.
Even in a landscape crawling with killers like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus. While Kentrosaurus was perfecting the tail as a high-speed weapon, another member of the Stegosaur family took a very different evolutionary path. This was Miragaia,
which also lived in the late Jurassic in Portugal, and possibly Morrison Formation as well.
a dinosaur with such a long neck, you'd be forgiven for thinking it wandered in from the sauropod side of the family tree. Seriously, it looks like a stegosaur doing a sauropod impression.
I don't think anyone would actually claim this. I don't think anyone would actually say this and actually claim that that's true.
Miragaia longicolum lived around 150 million years ago in what is now Portugal, and its most striking feature is that elongated neck.
Okay, so some researchers claim that Miragaia is a junior synonym of Ducentrurus. For a smaller stegosaur like Miragaia, this is actually quite well fortified, as you can see here.
Up to 17 vertebrae long, more than twice as many as any known stegosaur. The big question is, why? Why did this one stegosaur evolve such a dramatically different body plan than its relatives?
Is it actually dramatically different? I don't think so, because in the end, it's still a stegosaurid.
While Stegosaurus had a short, thick neck built for low browsing, think mid-level ferns and shrubs, Miragaia took a different approach. It was more slender, more lightly built, and overall a bit smaller.
Now, from what I can gather, its elongated neck suggests a unique feeding strategy or a distinctive display feature not seen in most other stegosaurs.
Measuring around 6 to 7 meters long.
7 meters I'm a little bit iffy, but gigantic Miragaia, basically Miragaia with gigantism, could have probably reached that length.
Or roughly 20 to 23 feet. But what it lacked in bulk, it made up for in one outrageous feature. That neck. But when you picture a stegosaur, you probably imagine a short-necked, low-slung tank of a dinosaur. But Miragaia flipped the script. This bizarre dinosaur mashed together traits that seemed to defy logic. A long neck, tall back plates, and tucked behind all of that, a brutal Thagomizer. Miragaia was a stegosaur-like Stegosaurus.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Miragaia was a stegosaur-like Stegosaurus. What even is this logic? Miragaia isn't even the closest related to the Stegosaurus.
But with a neck that stretched farther than any other known member of its family, this odd anatomy may have helped it browse for food higher up than its relatives.
Okay, I guess this is fine. I'm still kind of confused about the Miragaia was a stegosaur-like Stegosaurus statement.
But it also meant one big thing. Its head was further away from its tail.
In proportion to its body. Sure, that is fine. if you meant that at least.
So how did this affect its weapon system?
The answer is longer nerve connections and therefore a longer time for signal to reach muscles and stimulate the muscles into swinging.
Well, that extra body length meant its tail became even more important. If something came up from behind, Miragaya wasn't turning around to bite or swipe.
Not like Stegosaurs in general would want to bite and swipe using their heads, but okay.
It just wasn't built like that. But it didn't have to, because waiting at the other end of a long, vulnerable spine was its spiked, flexible whip of a tail.
Calling it a whip again. It's Miragaya is basically just a clone of Kentrosaurus at this point. Terrible joke.
And while the full tail has not been found, stegosaurs from the same region show similar Thagomizer setups, so the odds are Miragaya was packing at least 4 serious spikes, and maybe even more.
Which is quite a wild speculation for a Thagomizer like this.
Please.
What makes Miragaya fascinating is the combination of defense and specialization. Its long neck wasn't just a weird evolutionary detour, it created a vulnerability, and nature responded with a countermeasure. A Thagomizer capable of defending a huge rear flank.
Makes sense given how a longer neck makes it more vulnerable to just getting its windpipe crushed and destroyed and causing it to just die. It's just a bit more risky that way.
It's the prehistoric equivalent of putting a security system on the back of a limousine. Miragaya shows us that Thagomizers weren't just copy and pasted across species. They evolved to fit unique needs.
You know, basically that's how evolution works, really. A bunch of creatures of the same species gain different traits because of mutations leading to a bunch of variation. I'm not going to go into detail, but you get what I mean.
Even in dinosaurs that weren't built like your typical stegosaur, because this elegant, lanky oddball wasn't just built to reach where others couldn't. It was built to survive where others didn't.
Literally every single thing has special adaptations to their environment. Really, there's really nothing new here.
The Stegosauridae family was bigger and more varied than most people realize.
The thing about this statement is a lot of people actually know quite a bit about a bunch of other stegosaurs like Stegosaurus, Warhosaurus, Kentrosaurus, etc. because of Jurassic World the game / Jurassic World Alive.
Besides Stegosaurus, Kentrosaurus and Miragaya, there were others. Now bear with me on the names guys, but we got the Churodroangosaurus.
Here comes the massive amount of mispronunciations, starting with the Tojangosaurus,
Dacenchurus, Haiaiwangusaurus,
Huayangosaurus,
and the Huerusaurus.
Warhosaurus.
Apologies for butchering any of these names.
Okay, I can forgive Tojangosaurus and Huayangosaurus and Dacenchurus, but Warhosaurus, man? Did you even try?
But these stegosaurs weren't just carbon copies of each other. Each species evolved with its own unique twist on the classic stegosaur design.
These are called genus, not species, but okay.
Take the gigant Spinosaurus for example. This dinosaur took spikes to a whole new level.
We can certainly use as a model from a game model tile, because Gigant Spinosaurus from Jurassic World Evolution.
Its massive shoulder spine stuck out sideways like giant razor-sharp shields. Unlike the smaller spikes or plates seen in its relatives, these oversized spikes might have been used for defense or display.
I'm willing to bet that those spines protruding out of the Gigant Spinosaurus, not the ones from its back, from its sides, by the way, they were more so used for mating purposes and all that. I don't think any predator would want to attack the Gigant Spinosaurus from the side. More than likely, they'll attack the Gigant Spinosaurus from the front anyway.
But whatever their purpose, they make Gigant Spinosaurus one of the weirdest and most memorable stegosaurs to ever walk the earth. It just goes to show evolution didn't just settle on one formula for these armored dinosaurs.
Not like every human looks the same anyway, so can't really be surprised.
Instead, it played with plates, spikes, and tails in countless creative ways across the Stegosaur family tree. Despite all what we know about Stegosaurs and their fearsome Thagomizers, the full story of these tail weapons is far from complete.
I'm guessing this guy meant that Sagomizer usage and all that is still not completely understood, but at least we know that they were used to defend those Stegosaurs with.
Fossil evidence directly showing the devastating power of these tails is surprisingly rare. Beyond the famous Allosaurus pelvis punctured by the Stegosaurus spike, our clearest proof that these tails could be lethal weapons, there's very little hard evidence relating to the true scale and damage these Thagomizers could inflict.
I mean, there's already evidence of Thagomizer inflicting a lot of damage, so you can speculate that if you will.
Kentrosaurus tail spikes, which show signs of wear and healed injuries, tell us they were actively used in combat, but for most Stegosaurs, the story remains more mysterious.
Likely used for both display and combat. That's really all I can say about this particular subject.
We still don't know exactly how fast some tails could swing, how frequently they were used offensively, or just how much damage a well-placed strike could cause. The Stegosaur lineage itself stretches far back, with the earliest known member being Adradikilt, which lived around 168 million years ago.
It's called the Adraticlit. It's kind of difficult to pronounce it, given it's a little bit of a tongue twister, but at least try, alright?
In what is now North Africa. From that point, Stegosaurs evolved and thrived through the Jurassic, spreading across various continents. The reign continued until about 120 million years ago, with Wuerhosaurus marking one of the last known Stegosaurs to walk the Earth.
We've actually got a Stegosaurian that lived later than the Wuerhosaurus. It's called the Yanbeilong. And we actually have another Stegosaurian that lived later than the Wuerhosaurus called the Mongolostegus.
Paleontologists continue to uncover fossils and apply modern technology with CT scans and biomechanical modelling to better understand these prehistoric weapons and how they worked. Each new discovery sheds light on the incredible diversity and adaptability of Stegosaurs, and may one day reveal just how deadly their Thagomizers really were.
I'll give this channel this. The audio, the recording, everything is likely done by a human. And not AI slop. This is not AI slop we're talking about. This is fine, I guess. At least someone actually tried to make a decent video about a Stegosaur. A decent video about Stegosaurs in general. So, yeah. This channel is, this video is not terrible on its own. It actually got quite a lot correct, which is good, but there are still quite a few outlandish statements, of course.
So while we celebrate the Thagomizer as one of the most dangerous and unique weapons in dinosaur history, the truth is, we're still just beginning to understand its full power and purpose. The story of the Thagomizer and the Stegosaurs who bore it is far from over.
Okay, here are the results of this paleontology bingo. As you can see here, this video isn't bad. Like, of course, it does have quite a few ridiculous statements that I just plucked in the thumbnail, but those are not clickbait, by the way. This is fine, I suppose. So props to this guy. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video. Special thanks to channel members for supporting this channel. It helps out a ton.